Welcome to the 318th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with John DeSimone, author of the new novel, The Road to Delano. Stay tuned for the interview. Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is John DeSimone, author of the new novel, The Road to Delano. John is also the author of the novels Leonardo's Chair and No Ordinary Man. And he also works with select clients to ghostwrite their memoirs. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for having me.
Sure. Well, if someone listening hasn't heard about your new novel, The Road to Delano, yet, how would you describe the novel?
Well, it's a coming of age story. It's a mystery, and it has a bit of a social bent. And what I mean by social bent is it's dealing with a wider issue, a problem in society. So it's set, and the characters have to respond with some really significant moral choices. And the moral choices they're in high school, and they're a little different. Not what kind of girlfriend am I going to have, or what am I going to wear, or who are my friends going to be, but some really significant moral choices pushed upon them by the social problem of the time. Okay, so that's in general terms. The social problem is the grape strike led by Cesar Chavez in Delano in 1968, and how he chose to deal with an intractable problem, and that was how the farm workers were treated during that time.
And so do you remember the original idea that led you to write The Road to Delano?
Sure. I was an adjunct professor at a university teaching freshman writing, and I read I could choose a book to write essays on, and I chose a book on the history of civil disobedience. And in there were, the usual essays, Gandhi, and we'll start with Socrates, went all the way through Martin Luther King. And in there was a couple of essays and excerpts on Cesar Chavez and how he used nonviolence in a labor action and as a form of civil disobedience. And I was just moved by it. And, I don't live very far from Delano, a couple hours. And I had just finished a book, and I thought this would be a great idea. And it just grew over time as I read about him and read about the people of that time and that culture. So how much research did you do about Cesar Chavez and the movement he led? Well, I'm like most people, even here in California. I knew so many streets are named after him, schools are named after him, parks are named after him. We have a Cesar Chavez Day. I know that he led the Great Boycott, and that was the extent of it. So I really was starting from zero. And he did not write a biography, but he was followed around by a very talented writer who pretty much recorded what happened starting in 1965 through 75. Those were the strike years. That author's name was Jacques Levy. So I started with that book, and you just go from there. And I would say, probably a whole year of research. But, you're researching, you're writing, you come up against a brick wall. The challenge that I had was I wanted to include the point of view of the growers. Nothing I'd read had really included their point of view. I went to the library in Bakersfield. I went to the library in Delano. I went to, of course, you go to the big online bookstores, and there's nothing that they wrote that indicated, what they were thinking, why they would do this. So that was the real challenge. I did find a box of newspaper clippings in the Delano Library, which is really just a little shoebox of a building. and an old librarian had cut out opinion pieces and articles and stored them in a banker's box, and that was very informative. So there was a lot of digging.
And so, what are your earliest memories of reading and books?
Oh my! So I was not big on, as a kid, I was not big on, the high level literature. I didn't start reading that until I was, late in high school and into college. I was really taken with adventure stories. Tom Swift. I don't know if you remember that name. If
I
that
do.
rings a bell, And the ironic thing about Tom Swift is everything that he's talking about now is coming true. Except for maybe Death Race, but Hardy Boys. Mysteries. Isaac Asimov. A lot of that type. I didn't read a lot of science fiction but a lot of adventure. I just remember reading a story about George Rogers Clark and his trek across the wilderness in early American history, and it just really moved me. So I was drawn to adventure stories, basically.
And so, can you talk to us a little bit about your journey into writing? When did you first get interested in writing, and what led you to writing your earlier novels?
Well, my interest I can date back to around when I was in 7th grade, maybe 8th grade, and I knew that I liked the idea. I was just always attracted to the sentence. At that point, I really wasn't good at it. I was not a prodigy. I can tell you stories about that. But we had to write an essay. I went to a Catholic school that was, it was ruled by the iron rod, and the nuns did the best they could. But we had to always play on blacktop. I will never forget this. And so the boys would all come banged up at the end of recess because we're playing basketball, we're playing football, we're playing baseball on blacktop. And, there was the same amount of abandon if you were playing on dirt. So, my knees still bear the marks of those days. At any rate, we could write an essay, and we were given this assignment. It had to be 8th grade. And write anything you want. And I wrote an essay called Why No Grass. I'm thinking about it now. It's like a protest essay. And everyone in the class got theirs back except for me. And I'm going, wow, this is interesting. An oversight, I assumed. But the mother superior the principal of the school was the mother superior, a slight woman, kind of a craggy face, in the black habit. And she comes in and she has my essay in her hand. And she went, I don't know how long it was, but I just sweated through that whole thing. She went into all the reasons why they didn't have grass. And, the farmer next door wouldn't sell them the land because he wants to turn it into apartments and make more money. And he doesn't care about us Catholic kids. And that's the thing I remember, and somehow the communists got in there, and I thought, wow, I'm in the back of the room. They don't pay attention to me. I don't have the best grades, but I can write something that kind of gets people riled up. She was riled up. So, then I was attracted to adventure stories, and I wrote a lot of stuff that never, that kids write. And so my parents weren't too, they were both business people. They weren't too encouraging in that vein. I always wanted to be a writer. I knew that that's what I would be, but they wanted me to get into business, that type of thing. So, a lot of people have gone through that. I often wonder, and I have to really put those thoughts aside, if I had just gone from an upward trajectory then, started really developing my craft and got into newspaper writing. But my parents were so objectionable to it that to reading my essays or reading my stories and reading that and concentrate on this other stuff. And so it just was always in the back of my mind. And then so when I was in college, I took a writing class with, I'll just never forget this. She's dead now, so I can mention her name. Hortensia Kalishier. She was a visiting writer. She's just really hoity-toity literary writer. You can find her books. She read my story, and they give you a one-on-one interview, like at least one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Visiting writer, and she had my paper in her hand again. I'm just like, I was back in the 8th grade, and boy, the Mother Superior thing. She said, "Okay, this is really interesting, John." She goes, "All I can tell you is, people aren't going to read you for your writing; they're going to read you for your stories." What I thought meant I wasn't a very good writer. And I think, that's what she was trying to tell me. So I just really had to put that aside, and just keep doing it. So I always wrote on the side. I got into business. I wrote on the side. I and pursued it on my own, and it was always, working and then at night or in the morning writing. So I did that for years until finally I got control of my sentences. And I would say in this book, my writing is much better than in Leonardo's Chair. My wife keeps telling me that. And my next book, I think, will be even better. So that's what I'm working on.
Well, I mentioned earlier that you ghostwrite memoirs. How does ghostwriting work?
Well, I was in corporate America. I was desperate to get out. My kids were out of college. I was single at that time. And I had, really developed some skills as a writer. And a friend of mine was a ghostwriter. And I was complaining to him one day, I just got to get out of this corporate world. It's killing me. I don't want to do this. And he looked at some of my stuff and goes, "Well, you're a good writer. I'll help you get into this business." So I took it as a way of supporting myself. Like, you can write for pay for other people until you can write for yourself. And I just fell into writing memoirs because memoirs really, the memoir and the novel, there's such a kinship. And the major difference is the memoir is not made up. Okay, we know that, right?
Right.
But the craft, the elements of a memoir, of a contemporary memoir, which has a very structured arc. The contemporary memoirs that do very well on the market by nobodies. Okay, if you're somebody, you can sell a book. They'll hire you a writer, and then the editor will fix it. Okay, if you are a celebrity, people want to hear those stories. But if you're not a celebrity, which most of the memoirs are, you have to have writing skill, and you have to structure your memoir so that it reads like a story. And when people say story, it's like the story they see in the movies, the story they read when they read their novels. They want a beginning, a middle, and an end. They want a definite, what's called story arc. And I apply the story arcs I've learned in fiction telling to memoirs, and it's really worked. And all the best memoir writers do that, whether they know consciously what they're doing.
And so what writing advice would you offer for listeners who are writing their own stories and novels?
Okay, well, if you're writing your own memoir, well, even if you're writing your own story, get into a writing group. I was in the same writing group for about 15 years. And that's a little too long because you want to break out of your writing group and get with, as your craft. Not every writing group, everyone is. Some people there as a hobby. Some people want to move on and become professionals. So as you progress in your skill, develop relationships with better writers. I did that. So I quit my corporate job. I'm writing for hire, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing adjunct work, trying to piece together a living. And, that's low paid, but at least it's steady. And I have my summers free. So every summer for about, 8 or 9 years, I went to writers' conferences all over the country. I did not, in the beginning, I went to conferences where there's just lectures. But the best writing conferences are the one that holds workshops. The big one out here in California is Squaw Valley. There's a really great one up in Napa Valley. The most fun conference I've ever been to in my life. They host the writing workshops in the gourmet cooking school in Napa Valley. And at night, typically at all these conferences at night, you do readings. All the readings are held at various wineries.
Wow.
That is
Sign me up.
absolutely, if you like wine, if you like food, and if you like books, unbelievable. Anyway, that was fun. They always bring in that attracts the best teachers. They get notable authors to run the workshops, and you really get to workshop your writing. And that's what you want to do. You want to keep pushing your writing in front of the top authors that are critics that you can get to, and that will improve your craft. And so, if you really want to get published, you have to improve your craft, and you have to write. So, that's there isn't any there is no other way to do it.
Sure.
If and you know that, and your listeners know that, but it's a long journey, and mine was a lot longer than other people, but I think I took a lot of detours.
What kept you going on that journey? What kept you inspired?
Gosh. It's something really deep inside me, okay? Because I've been in workshops. I was at a workshop in UCLA. I remember this. So I worked in LA for many years, and at night, for years, I took a writing class at UCLA. They have a great extension course for writers, excellent teachers. And I'll never forget this. Right in the middle of a workshop, one of the writers got up and he said, "That's it. I'm done. I'm quitting." And everyone tried to talk him out of it because, I think I've done this long enough. I'm never going to get it. And he left and he never came back to class. Now, I don't know if he had a change of heart later. I always got just enough encouragement to keep moving on. Never anyone said, "You're the next Steinbeck." God, that would just go to your head. You don't want that. You just want enough encouragement to say, "Okay, there's a lot here." So I would, people spend their money. My family, everyone in my family has a boat or a horse, or I don't have that. What I've spent my money on is getting really good advice, having other people read it, and that costs money. The top editors will charge you, unfortunately, to read it. But that's all. They're all doing the same thing I'm doing. They're scrapping along, trying to make a living. And so if I get extra money, I try to get one of the absolute top editors to read it and critique it. And I don't know of any other way. So I don't have a boat. I have a nice car. We live in a nice house, but that's it. That's what I do.
Gotcha. So what novels or nonfiction books have you read recently that you enjoyed?
Okay. I'm a big history buff. And so I'm going to get it. It's right here on my shelf. Hold on.
Okay.
Well, it should be on my shelf. It's bear with me. Okay. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The name of the let me get on my Instagram. It was about the American Revolution, and the three founding fathers who influenced the intellectual side of the revolution. And most of the generals came from Virginia, the big generals. But it's called Rebels. How Hancock, Adams, and Quincy family fanned the flames of a revolution. The three rebels. And absolutely fantastic book. She just years of research to get this out, and I just love that book. So I try to alternate a history book with a or nonfiction book with a novel, and probably read 2 to 1.
And who are some of your favorite novelists?
Well, the California novelists are really my favorite. Upton Sinclair. I mean, he was the one that really inspired me in this idea of writing a novel about a problem, as opposed to a personality. Most historical fiction today is taken up with romance, and I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's what it is, and probably one of the reasons why my book doesn't have getting a wider market is because it doesn't have a stirring romance. That's one thing that Ken Follett, one of my favorite historical writers, is able to do: combine history with romance. And I didn't accomplish that yet. We'll do that someday. But no one calls his stuff historical romance, but he has romance in there. But most of the World War II fiction is really historical romance. Upton Sinclair, Steinbeck, Norris, with Octopus, and
sure, yep.
Those were my early reading. On a national scale. I mean, To Kill a Mockingbird. I remember I did not read that until I was in college, and I was so moved by the story. I just remember sitting there, just going, "Wow, how could someone do this?" I mean, how could someone write? What does it take to write a story like this? That's what I remember wondering. And, To Kill a Mockingbird, she spent 7 years writing and revising that book. Steinbeck did his book in like 6 months. The Grapes of Wrath.
Sure.
But that was his third or fourth novel. And he had already written In Dubious Battle, which was about the grape strike, but about the communist organizers. And his friend who ran the migrant camp, the federal migrant camp up there in Wheat Patch, handed him 120 pages of notes that he had taken on all of these different abuses and all of these stuff. And that was kind of the beginning. So he had a research partner for that book, and which is, people do that. I mean, novelists, you need some type of help with research if you're going to do it quickly. On the other hand, Harper Lee went through draft after draft after draft until she finally got it. And when she got it, And,
yes. So where can people find you online if they'd like to learn more about you and your books?
Well, my website is John DeSimone, DeSimone.com. And, of course, on Facebook, John DeSimone, author. And my book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository, just about any place. And you can get it from the bookstores. It's distributed worldwide. But the thing about The Road to Delano, can I just say one thing about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And I was really conflicted. I did not include Cesar Chavez as a personality in the book until about the third draft. And I just didn't know how people would take putting an iconic figure like that in the book. And when I finally did do it, it worked out really well. And I didn't know how the Chavez family would take it. They're very protective of his image, and I think the book was very positive towards Cesar Chavez. Personally, I think he is a cultural hero. He's someone who rose above the elements that kept him and his people down. He refused to be a victim, and he learned how to take action to improve his situation and the situation of those that he cared about. And those are heroes in our culture. The heroes aren't on welfare. I'm not saying you shouldn't be on welfare. I'm just saying they're not. They're taking their life in their own hands, and they're saying, okay, my situation isn't good here, and I'm going to find a way to change it, because that's the way America works. America allows you to better yourself. And his story really is an American story, every much as American as Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement in the South. It's just that Cesar Chavez was doing it with a very underrepresented representative group. The farm workers are a shadow population among us. They're there. We know they're there because our food's on our table. And 90% of the nuts and fruit in the country come from that valley, and 50% of the grapes or more. So, the farm workers, they have been trod upon for, 60, 70, 80 years here in California. And he was the first one to really break through that logjam, the reluctance of the growers to actually sit down and talk with their labor and come to an agreeable way of solving a problem. And he did it through the use of nonviolence, and I thought that was heroic, and that's why I wanted to write the book.
Great. Well, again, we've been speaking with John DeSimone, author of the new novel, The Road to Delano. The novel is available now, so go buy a copy. And John, thanks for doing this interview.
Thank you for having us.